What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 391. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and I am sitting here in a chic hotel room in downtown Omaha, Nebraska. And sitting across from me, or should I say laying across from me on the bed, that's right, patrons, check your patron feed, you'll see, in a nice t-shirt, is Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, hello, sir. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
You just got into town.
That I did.
I actually beat you here for once. Coming from the West Coast, I'm always coming in later, but for some reason I was able to get here pretty early today.
Well, I had to, wrap up a stream and then...
You were streaming like when you should have been driving to the airport, right? Like,
I was, yeah.
Okay. Just to be, like, I saw some tweets in your direction and I'm just like, what is he doing? And then you got here and you're like, I may have cut it a little close. But you made it.
I did.
Yeah, we're here to do coverage here at Grand Prix Omaha. And we thought, since we're going to be in the same room anyway, we'll do the show live together. It's always kind of fun to mix that up. So we've got Amonkhet set review. We're also going to touch on the Team Draft Super League because we have both now played a round of it. I got to play mine last week, and I thought I'd just touch base on that with you listeners at home as well. First, though, got to mention our sponsor, ChannelFireball.com. Make sure you check out GrandPrixVegas.com if you're planning on attending or want to check out some of the details on what is going to be a huge Grand Prix event with 3 Grand Prix happening in a row and even overlapping each other a bit. Legacy, Limited, and Modern happening June 15th through 18th in Las Vegas, Nevada. Again, GrandPrixVegas.com is where you can go. I'll put a link in the show notes for that just so that you can have an easy way to find it. But I'm going to be there. Luis is going to be there. We're going to be doing coverage. It is going to be an absolute magic blowout. I mean, it'll probably have kind of a convention-y feel to it as opposed to just a straight up Magic Grand Prix because there's going to be so many people in town for it. If you've ever been to any of the Grand Prix Vegases, they tend to be quite an event. While you're on Channel Fireball, you can find awesome content. I talk about it a lot on the show because, it's a big part of the equation for how it links up with Limited Resources in that, we're here to try to make you get better at Magic. And there's a lot of awesome content on Channel Fireball that also helps you with that, including I've got some booster drafts up there right now. If you're into Constructed or if you're into Reduke, or if you're into both, you can watch him play Jund in Modern, which is one of his favorite things to do, just full stop. Luis, you've got a video up there right now of you playing a blue-red Delver deck in Pauper, of all things. Was that fun?
It was. Pauper, I think, is kind of an underrated format. I mean, I know it has a lot of fans, but people who don't play don't realize how powerful the format is. Despite being all commons, that's the word Pauper comes from. It's got a lot of sweet cards. I mean, I was playing a deck with Delver of Secrets, Daze, Lightning Bolt. These are all very powerful cards.
Yeah, that format is underrated on power level for sure. ChannelFireball.com, of course, is where you can find all of these things. The show is also brought to you by you via the Patreon. We really appreciate all your support. It means a ton to us. And you get some cool perks as well. One of them is you get to ask questions on the Patreon Question of the Week thread, which I will likely be refreshing soon, by the way. This one comes from Sarah Lynn, who says, "Hi, Marshall and Luis. After playing with Amonkhet for a few weeks..." She submitted this a little while ago. "So, after having played Amonkhet for a while now, what's your opinion on the monuments? They seem bad to me, but I have certainly lost to them, especially Ronus's monument. Thanks." And I figured this would be a good question given our subject matter here as we're going to start to look back on some of our initial impressions and set review stuff from Amonkhet. But now I feel like we've had the set in our hands long enough to have a much better feel for it. And the monuments are and were very difficult to grade. Now I feel like I have a strong feel for them as well. Where are you at on the monuments as of now, Luis?
I think Oketa's monument is good, the white monument, and I think Ronus's monument also is pretty good. Like it has a lot of good synergy with Bitterblade Warrior and like Hoodie Bee, Hooded Brawler. The other ones, I think you're generally making mistakes if you put them in your deck.
Yeah, that's where I came down on it as well. I actually really like the white monument. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago on the show that you can even put it in a deck that doesn't play white and not feel that bad about it. Ronus's monument is much more narrow for me. I really want a heavy creature density, and I really want to be a beatdown deck before I'll put that card in my deck. I'm generally reluctant to put cards in my deck that do stone nothing if I can't attack, if I don't have any attacks. The good news is that Ronus's Monument enables attacks a lot of the time, and it does a pretty darn good job of it. By the time you get your second or third activation on it, you really feel like you've gotten your money's worth, even if you are accepting a pretty major downside, which is A, you're playing a card for 3 mana that doesn't do anything, that turn, and B, if you do find yourself behind in a race, which it is very easy to do in this format, given that there's a significant number of aggressive decks, Ronus's Monument is not likely to dig you out from being behind, and that is a significant downside. With Oketra's Monument, if you do find yourself behind, you can play a couple of creatures, and it actually goes a decent amount of the way to helping you stabilize your board. 1/1 blockers really do add up quickly. They help with menace and just being able to survive longer anyway. So yeah, the monuments though, interestingly, if you erase the text about making your spells cheaper, or your creatures cheaper, I don't know if my grade really changes that much. I find that handy, but not the reason that I play them.
Yeah, I don't think that's a huge part of the card. I think that Ronus's Monument shows up in green decks mostly because the green decks are the ones that want that effect.
Yeah.
More than just the cost reduction.
Yeah, because the big creatures benefit the most.
I will say that Hazoret's Monument, I've seen it get played and not be terrible. That's why you get to rummage when you play a red creature. But in general, I don't like the card.
Yeah, every time I've seen it, it just seemed awful. Interesting monuments though, or interesting question about the monuments there, because they were difficult to address. Okay, that moves us to our Crack-A-Pack. This is a funny one, Luis. I've got this huge booster pack. I don't know what this is called.
Doesn't look particularly real.
No, it's like this retail pack. It's there's a booster in here, and then there's this extra packaging on it. Oh, bless you. That goes on the, so that they can hang it at like a retail store, like not at a game store. Anyway, this comes from my friend Damiano from Italy, who I met. Somehow I met drafting at Barnes & Noble by my house. It's just the weirdest thing. But anyway, thank you, Damiano, for that. And we actually ended up playing each other in the finals.
Who won?
I did. I had 3 cut to ribbons.
That's a weird card to have 3 of.
It's very weird.
Sounds effective, though.
It was pretty good. I couldn't even cast ribbons either.
Oh,
Didn't
well,
matter.
still.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into this Amonkhet pack and see if we get something sweet. All right, first card out, Brute Strength.
Playable, not a first pick.
No, it's a good card, though. Sacred Cat?
I'll pass on the Sacred Cat. I think it is also a playable, but definitely not a first pick.
Yeah, we overrated this one a bit. Though it's making a comeback.
Yeah, it is.
Cancel.
Nope.
I'm going to cancel the cancel. Jesus, we get all the cards. How about Bloodlust Insider?
Yeah, I'd hoped you weren't first picking that.
I'm not going to first pick it. I generally try to not play it unless I feel like it goes in a specific, unless it really slots in well. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Wander in Death. Another playable, but no way, right? These aren't the type of cards we want.
I think I'm just going to start shaking my head, which you can then translate for the...
Yeah, this is the downside of being in person, is that you just look at me and forget where you're going to start making hand gestures.
I didn't forget. I was sitting
How good do you think this card is? Like, Luis is holding up 7. You know? Spidery Graphs?
No, we're not really doing it here.
Oh.
All right, Cartouche of Strength.
We did it.
Yeah, that is the pick right now.
I would absolutely take
Did you know that fighting is optional?
I know that.
Yes, if your opponent plays a pump spell, you do not have to carry through.
Yeah, I think you have to be from Florida to not know that. Hyena Pack?
I don't like this card all that much. The stats to cost look okay, but I think it just ends up being a little slow.
It's pure filler.
There's also a lot of good 4s in this format.
Yeah.
So,
it really pales in comparison to the Minotaur and stuff. This card just looks so bad. How about Impeccable Timing? I actually played this card in this format where the last time I was printed, I really avoided it.
I was pretty down on it, but I have found myself playing it a lot more just because people are just playing all these 2-mana Exert creatures, and this actually does really well against Exert. It kills Hooded Brawler, Gust Walker, Bitterblade Warrior, all those things.
Emberhorn Minotaur, it actually kills stuff. So I've been playing it more. I mean, yes, it still has the same caveats, but it works. Ooh, our first uncommon. I like this card a lot. Nygma Drake.
I do like Nygma Drake a lot. I think I would start with Cartouche of Strength over Nygma Drake just because it's monocolored, but Drake is a solid second to third pick.
Next we've got Trueheart Duelist.
I don't mind this card, the 2-mana 2/2 that can block an additional creature with Embalm 3, but I'm not taking it over Well, I could see taking it over Cartouche actually. It is a really good 2-drop.
It really is a great 2-drop.
And I think white is substantially better than green.
It just feels like a
So
push.
I think I actually might just take the True Heart Duelist right now.
Okay, I'm going to put these two next to each other. We'll discuss that in a minute. Ooh. How about On-Crop Champion?
It is a gold card. So I'm less inclined to start with a gold card, but
yeah, I like either of these two. We'll just wheel this guy, right? Just take one of these.
You probably won't wheel it, but I also don't want to start with a white-green card.
Well, I mean, you got to have a plan. Like, I've heard that from somebody before.
You do. And that plan is to not take a gold card?
Wheel it? No.
Yeah.
All right, we've got two rares. This is great. One foil and one not foil. Our first one is Neheb the Worthy. That's the 1 black-red 2/2 legendary Minotaur warrior with first strike is your other Minotaur's first strike. And as long as you have 1 or fewer cards in hand, he gets +2/+0. And whenever Neheb deals combat damage to a player, each player discards a card. This card's good. I think I'd rather have Cartouche of Strength or True Heart Duelist, pack one, pick one, but I could be wrong. Neheb's really good.
Yeah, Neheb is quite good. I would probably start with Neheb over those cards.
Okay, so that's going in the maybe pile. And then our last card is Curator of Mysteries, the 2 blue 4/4 Flying Sphinx. Whenever you cycle or discard another card, you can scry one, and it's got cycling for blue.
So blue kind of sucks in this format. I haven't been super impressed with it, but Curator is the best card in the pack, I think, overall.
Like on a wrist to ward and all that kind of
just
stuff?
As well, in terms of just the power level of the card itself. Okay. I think I would start with Curator. It's funny that it's close. In most formats, this wouldn't be close. It's just so much better.
Remotely close, I know.
But in this format, I'm kind of down on blue.
I just want to take this Cartouche. I've been playing a lot of green.
I think green is fine. My guess is I would take
a lot of green with black, Luis.
I would take Curator, followed by Neheb, followed by True Heart Duelist, followed by Cartouche, but they're all very close. And this is actually an interesting crack pack because I think you could just take any of these cards and not be too far off.
Yeah, I think my pick order is Curator, Cartouche, Neheb, Duelist. It's hard to say because Neheb can be quite good, but I have not found black-red specifically to be great. Like, I don't feel like you can make a great deck in it, but it doesn't just necessarily lend itself to being an automatically great deck, in my opinion. All right, that was a good pack, and we've got 2 rares to put in the pile to send off to a lucky listener. Maybe we'll do that next week or the week after. Okay, so let's get into our main topics. We've got kind of 2 things to talk about. The first one is I wanted to do an update on the Team Draft Super League as I had a chance to draft. And
I watched your draft.
You watched it, and I want to get your take on that because we have not had a chance to actually talk about it yet.
Yeah.
And, I need to learn, right? I mean, the way that I'm looking at this, Luis, is like, this is my first team draft after having received any proper training or tried to learn it. I've done, I think I've done like 5-ish of them in the past, but they were spread out over 5 or 6 years, and it was just sort of a random, like, got pulled into one. But I never, the closest thing I've ever gotten is like a crash course or having commentated a GP with it or something, So like, I had some ideas floating around, but I never cared enough to like sit down with you and have the chat that we did on the podcast or talk to Ben about it or, really pick somebody's brain and get into the nitty gritty of what's going on until now. So, when I sat down, I felt at least that I had conceptualized some things. That said, it's hard. Man, team draft is like next level drafting because you're making these calculations every single time and you're trying to read the table. My biggest goal when I sat down was to try to leverage the skills that I know I do have about reading the table and understanding how the cards are flowing and that kind of thing, and try to capitalize on that because I knew that I would be missing some of the subtleties that are just harder and come with repetitions and feel type thing, which I just don't have at this point. So that was kind of what I focused on.
Yeah, my goal when I sat down was to draft perfectly and win easily, and I just did both those things. So it worked out pretty nicely.
Okay.
So I do want to mention a couple things before we get into this because I'm sure a lot of listeners are wondering why we're talking about team draft so much. I think one is that this is a really exciting project for both of us to not only get better at team draft and learn as much as you can. I know that me, you, and Ben have this like. This group chat where we just talk about team draft all week.
Yeah.
that's the kind of stuff that drives us as Magic players.
Totally.
As content producers, as all this stuff. Like, I mean, this is where the passion is.
Yeah.
So you get to listen to that because I think that's always interesting to listen to people like going ham on something, which we are.
Which we care about. Yeah.
Also, this is a follow-up to our previous discussion. So we're not going to check in every week about the Draft Super League, but I think, you had your first match. It is an interesting update. I had my first match. And I wouldn't be surprised if, I don't know, maybe we took it upon ourselves to push Team Draft into a slightly more prominent role just in general for Magic. So, if we get interested enough in it, that could be kind of cool. But
so what ended up happening in my draft was, so just to refresh, just to set the stage, it's me, Kenji, and Paul Cheon. That's Team Limited Resources. We're playing up against the Gamers Helping Gamers
you
team.
have Team Limited Resources, but I'm not on the team.
Yeah, we felt like we didn't need you. So, and so that's us. We played against Team Gamers Helping Gamers, which is John Finkel, the GOAT, and also Jamie Park and Chris Bakula. So those are the teams that when we sat down. And man, it was interesting. I was excited. I do so many drafts that when I sit down to just open up a draft, I'm like, oh, this could be cool. What's going to happen? But I don't feel anything. You know what I mean? But here I was like, palms are sweaty, and I was like, oh, this is going to be what's going to happen?
Knees were weak.
Yeah, whatever. Am I gonna open up a glory bringer like Luis, or am I gonna open up something a little less potent? I ended up first picking a cartouche of strength for my pack out of a not amazing pack, but frankly, I made that pick pretty quickly and was more concerned about what I was passing at that point and trying to figure that out. And I spent a lot of time on that first pack because I felt like that was going to be a super important, signpost for what I was sending.
Well, after watching your draft and watching some other people's drafts, both at your week and the week that I played, I feel like you really took to heart, I think, that what's at the core of team draft versus normal draft, which is team draft is zero sum. Every pick, it's not what makes my deck better. It's what gives my team the most value, which is either adding to my deck or taking away from my team or opponent's deck. Mm-hmm. And you also have to factor in what's going to get to my teammate if I pass these things. Like, what is the value of the next couple picks? Like after like 2 or so picks, it's too hard.
Yeah.
Because then you're
the decision tree.
The decision tree just multiplies too much because you don't really know what the next couple people are going to take. But you really took that to heart watching your draft. All your picks were with that lens in mind. Other people were not doing that. She ended up with a block constructed zombie deck.
Yeah, his deck was absurd.
He had a deck that it might have been the best deck he ever drafted, and even setting aside what that means because it's Paul, he actually just had a legit great deck for an 8-player draft. He did, and he was playing a team draft. So
it was weird.
Something was wrong with the people drafting next to him.
Yeah,
it just couldn't be right.
Yeah, it felt like that after I saw his deck because I knew some of the cards that I had passed that had made it, that I'm like a Wayward Servant made it to him, and I'm like, wait, what? I almost took it first just because it and the cartouche to me were of similar power level for being the high, cards that you want to go for. But I felt like, if I'm going to use a tiebreaker there, I'd rather pass a gold card and take a non-gold card. So it ups my chance of actually getting to play it.
Yeah, there's a really interesting string of picks in pack 2 for your draft where you first pick Hate, Vizier of Many Faces from Chris Bakula.
Yeah.
He then second pick hates Cast Out from Paul Cheon, and then Paul Cheon third pick hates Deem Worthy from John Finkel.
Is that right? Yeah.
So it was actually an example of 3 people having the best pick be taking a card away from their enemy. Uh-huh. So that is what people are supposed to do. And again, just looking at your draft, I mean, you can talk through, and you put up the video of
I did,
and
I'll put a link of that too. Yeah, I decided just to let it all fly, and part of the reason for that was to keep myself in check. Because I live narrated the video like I would any other draft video, and I wanted to get on tape what I was thinking so that I can go back and fix it if I have things that I'm doing wrong, and also so that I don't get to be like, oh, well, it worked out, because spoiler alert, we won. Our team won quite handily.
In a landslide.
Yeah, and so it was one of those things where, it all kind of worked out and we're all happy, and now we're all geniuses, right? I didn't want it to be like that because I don't get to do this very often, and I have to do it again.
Well, that's the killer, right?
Yeah.
Is me, you, and Ben are getting all excited about this, and this is what I think might spur us into a little more action, is we're so excited, we're talking all week about this, but we're we never get to do this.
Yeah.
So
and I want to do more. Like I want, it is getting the gears going in my head. So I want to tell you what I was thinking, because getting into individual picks here, maybe I could pick a couple of them that I could illustrate, but it's a little hard in an audio format. And I have the video there for people to critique or, shower me with praise or whatever they want. But I will tell you what I did try to do. Okay. And what I did try to actively do, because first off, I watched every seed of every draft from the first 2 drafts. Okay. So I'm like, okay, I'm Ben Stark. Here I go. And I just went through all of his picks, and Ben is a wrecking ball. He's just taking everything in sight that could be playable, anything that has a rare symbol on it. He's snatching it up, and he's just accumulating these cards. And he really put a dent in the people sitting next to him. I mean, he had a meaningful effect, where a lot of the people in this league, they're just drafting. I don't want to call out people too hard here, but I could just show you the draft viewer from some of the players in the draft that you did and the ones that I did, and it just looks exactly like what you would expect. They just took the best card for their deck at basically every single juncture, and that was it.
I remember you messaging us and being like, are people team drafting? Because they're just taking the best card out of the pack for their deck.
And I was like, just look at this. Just watch this one player.
And Ben and I were like, they're not actually team drafting. They're just drafting.
You're like, they were just bad. I'm like, okay, good. Because I'm sitting here trying to learn from this. And I'm like, is it all just, did you guys tell me all this stuff, but everybody just sits down and goes, shrug, take the best card for my deck? And I can tell you that after having watched Ben's, no, that is not the case. So my thing was, I was focusing on a couple of things. One of them that stood out to me was that running that little equity thing where I go, okay, here's the 2 best cards. Is it better for me to take this, or is it worse for them to have it? And trying to use my judgment to do that. But the thing that I was looking out for, and for some reason, I don't know if it's common, but I felt like I was running into it almost constantly, was there's a decent card for me, and then there's 2 cards in the same color that if I was going to hate one, they would just get a decent card anyway. And so I kept not doing that. Right. But it felt, I didn't expect it to happen as often as it did. I just felt like every time I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to take this there's an electrify in the pack or whatever. I'm just like, okay, I guess I just pass both of these and take this black card for my deck or whatever. And I kept doing that over and over again. So that popped up. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Is that normal? Is that just do that?
That can happen, yeah. Okay. I mean, you don't really have outs there. It's the same reason that, in the draft that I did when I tabled Angler Drake, which I think was wrong, by the way.
I do too.
But I think the reason that no one else at the table took Angler Drake is it was in the pack with Drakehaven. And people were like, well, there's no point hating one of these 2 blue cards. That logic eventually breaks down when they both table, and then you realize no one wants Drakehaven, so you should still hate Angler Drake.
Yes.
But I got Angler Drake, and I won
you got it. So. And you won with it easily.
But that is why that happens, is that when you see Magma Spray and Electrify, it's generally, you're not getting tons of value by hating the Magma Spray. You're getting some, but you're not getting a lot. So if you see something like, a Hooded Brawler for you, as opposed to one of these cards you're going to put in your sideboard, you should do all right.
Yeah. The other thing that I tried to do, and it ended up working out, though I admittedly I told myself, I want to be really aggressive with this thing that I want to do, which is that, so what ended up happening is I got past a Decimator Beetle early, pack 1, pick 2, or pick 3, I can't remember. And this was from Pakula, he was passing to me. And so I'm was mainly taking black cards, and I had a few white cards as well. I had taken a Gustwalker 2nd pick, and then 3rd pick was the Beetle. But I was trying to stay open on colors and not feel like I'm locked in. And I picked up a couple of okay green cards late, but not any type of signal. And I felt strongly that Chris was in green. If I was sitting in a regular table, I'm just using my normal feel for the table type thing. And I thought, I think Chris is in green. And so since I had some black cards and I had a Decimator Beetle, I thought, I am just going to step on him and just move in on green. Now, I ended up opening that Vizier of Many Faces, and while I didn't think that Chris was in blue necessarily, I thought it would be too risky to pass it in case I was wrong, so I took it. I just said, look, I don't think he's in blue because I saw some decent blue late and it kind of just didn't feel like it, but I'm like, I don't have a lot of confidence in that, and if I pass it to him and I'm wrong, it's just a disaster, so I took it. But then I just started taking green cards, and I just cut the hell out of green for that entire second pack. And Chris wasn't green, and I took a bunch of cards from him. I mean, I just did, and I ended up playing them in my deck. And then, of course, in the last pack, I was just kind of trying to scrap together what I could while not passing too much. I was very much in that sort of middle zone. My deck ended up being black-green with some white. And the white was not really great cards. I just really needed to make to playables, and, they were kind of there. So the question I have is, is that fundamentally even a good strategy, the one I had? Is that idea I had worth pursuing? The idea of figuring out what the guy on my right is in and then cutting him in the second pack if it can benefit me.
You don't want to be there. In general, if Chris is green, you don't want to be green because it's worse for you 2 to the 3 packs.
Yeah.
But you can also end up in a situation where enough green has gotten through that you think they're green, but green is still the color that you're supposed to be, and then you can try to cut them pack 2, and that's still better than nothing.
Yeah, because for me it was weird because, so I totally get what you're saying. It's 3 packs. I don't want to be green if he is, because 2 out of the 3 packs, right? But let's fast forward to the end of the first pack. Now I have Cartouche of Strength and Decimator Beetle and some black cards, basically, with a couple of white cards in there as well. Now I'm looking at it like a different equation. Now I'm saying, would I like to take the advantage of me having a read, going with it, assuming that I'm right, getting to just slash him in this second pack, which is fine for me because it feels like a normal pack for me. In fact, I'm probably a little plus EV on the green because it's been cut. And it can allow me to play 2 of my best cards, to be honest. Like the Beetle and the Cartouche were probably 2 of my best cards, knowing that I'm going to have the flip side of that coin be I'm going to get screwed in the last pack when he's taking the green cards and I'm just getting, a few things that filter through. That was my thinking. I didn't necessarily think about it before I sat down. I was actively trying to figure out what he was in as well as what I was passing. But again, when I saw those 2 cards, the Beetle and the Cartouche, and I thought, I could just be green. I could just fill out this with some green commons here and switch back to black for the last pack. How does that logic stand up?
It works because you took those cards without knowing that he was going to be green. Obviously going to the draft, you don't want to be the same color as the person you're right. But because you already have these cards, they're a sunk cost. No matter what color you go, these cards still exist. The fact that they add up with those other cards to give you a good benefit to drafting green is real.
Okay.
I mean, it'd be the same as, a more extreme example is if you first pick Angel of Sanctions or Glorybringer, right? Then it's going to be really hard for you not to be red or white, depending on which one you have. Even if you know the person to your right is those colors or one of those colors, because the value of having one of those cards in your deck is so high.
Yeah.
Now, Green Cartouche and Decimator Beetle aren't the same value, but the funny thing is this actually translates really well to normal drafting. Because in normal drafting, one of the things you can do that is very successful is exactly what you talk about, which is cut the reverse cut, right? Which is when you for example, you end up in pack 1. Let's say you first pick a good red, white, gold card, right? And then you take a bunch of red cards and maybe you get 1 white card and you're like, well, I think the person on my right is drafting white. Then you realize, well, in pack 2, you're going to pick up a ton of white because 2 people in a row cut white. Pack 3, you're not going to get much white, but you got enough red in pack 1 that you should be fine.
Yeah.
You are really getting a huge edge out of that. And
often, they're going down, you're going up.
Yeah, often it's worth it. And that's in an individual draft where you don't really care about the quality of the deck to your right. In a team draft, it's a little more pronounced because you're already in a position where you have an incentive to draft this color. And the fact that you're high confidence that it's the person to your right's color does give you a little bit of extra value.
Yeah.
Because you were in a position where, yes, you could try to go white, black or something like that. But then you'd be passing Chris a bunch of green cards and you'd be, sidelining 2 green cards that you already have in your pool that are good.
That are 2 of my best cards.
Right. Yeah. So I think that it worked out well, and there's a reason to do that, both in an individual draft and a team draft, and identifying that is really important. It actually came up more in individual draft when you have a different set pack 2. The most extreme example I found was in Champions, Betrayers, Saviors, where Betrayers had the best white by a lot.
And what was that, the middle?
That was the middle one. Uh-huh. So one of the strategies that players had at the Pro Tour, where that was those sets, was to take other colors except white if white was cut, and then just go white in pack 2 because pack 2 is where the payoff was.
Interesting.
So they would let the person to their right cut white in pack 1 and then just steal the payoff.
Oh, that's insane.
So
what a huge upside.
That's something to look for. Again, translating to normal draft, it actually is very important to know this too, because the game is not just don't be the colors of the person to your right. The game is trying to draft the best deck. And sometimes that does involve being to the color of the person to your right. Even if you 100% know, even if face up, wow, I just saw them take 5 red cards, yet I'm going to draft red back too.
Right.
And knowing when to jump
have
in.
It be right.
Yeah, is very interesting.
Yeah. But it was fun to do that. Kenji ended up drafting a kind of a medium red-white deck. I haven't actually watched his draft. I don't know how he did in the draft itself, but his deck ended up okay. I know that doesn't really, explain a lot. But yeah, our deck seemed better than theirs in general. And then when the games actually played out, we actually ended up kind of smashing and we ended up winning 5-2. I lost to Finkel. I had both of our losses. I lost to Finkel and Jamie Park in 3 games. They were close, but I played pretty poorly and definitely got punished for it, that was tough. It's hard it's hard because I really want to play well, but I just made some mistakes and they get you.
Well, I just thought it was generous because you saved them from the embarrassment of the 5-0 clean sweep.
Yeah, I was really I would have killed to just cry. I mean, I could have it looked like we were in a good spot anyway, but I played Finkel and we had 4 match wins. I could have sealed it against him and I was very close too. I had a huge board
I watched your guys' matches.
Yeah, but I just, it ended up being such a huge complicated board and I just didn't feel confident with my play afterwards. And I mean, I made a couple of, I made a bad mistake, just kind of a, noob, maybe not that quite, but just a oversight level mistake against Jamie that could have cost me. I don't know if it did, but it really was bad. And then like a not plan out my whole turn type mistake. And then against John, I had some I don't know, I felt overwhelmed a little bit, I think. We each had 7 or 8 creatures and I ultimately said, okay, I'm going to play around Limits of Solidarity, which is a card that we had deckless, and I'm just like, okay, fine, I'm not going to lose to this. And I mean, I set myself in a fine position, and it didn't work. I actually had a really exciting final turn against John because he was attacking with 2 creatures in the air that he needed to both hit because he was dead on board if they didn't win that turn, and and I had Shafet Monitor in my hand and I had 5 lands. And in my deck, I had Stinging Shot and Impeccable Timing. So I'm go. And he's attack with both. And I'm cycle Shafet Monitor. And if I hit either of those, I actually win the game. But I didn't.
Do you think it's logically consistent for you to play Stinging Shot after the discussion we had last week?
Yes, of course it is. I'm going to take full advantage of all of the.
The color pie bleeds.
Don't say that. Man, we did get it was interesting. That discussion, by the way, we should touch on that just briefly because it was really interesting. People loved it that we got deep and we went into it.
Oh, we were getting into it. I think that I would mulligan the discussion if we could because I think the waters got muddied.
Yes,
that's the
that
problem
I agree. See, the thing is, I don't think that means that you throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that the conversation was interesting and worth having.
Well, until you shifted the goalposts, yeah.
I let one sub point get away, and I used a bad example, by the way, with the Stinging Shot. But there was 2 kind of points happening simultaneously at one point, and I felt it's our job as the hosts of the show to kind of reel that in and say, because there's 2 things at play here when it comes to these conversations. One, we have to make sure that it's clear what we're actually talking about, right? And the things I said about the color pie and the things I said about the situational cycling cards, I stand by both, but they just shouldn't have merged. And I think Ben brought up something, and I kind of just ran with it, and it was wrong. And again, my example was also poor. So I think that, again, as hosts, we're supposed to do that. But there's this other thing that happens on podcasts a lot that I think is a mistake, which is that when conversations go on for a little while, like that one, we went off for a while about it, is that as a host of a show, you have a kind of a timer that goes in the back of your head that says, have we been talking about this too long? Are we too in the weeds here? Is this too much? But I really try to like not just immediately go for that first instinct, because when I listen to podcasts and the hosts get into it and start getting into the nitty gritty of something, I get furious when they go, nah, we've talked about that enough. Let's move on to the next boring subject.
Right. So like if you started talking about like the Team Dress Super League and then got derailed into a conversation about color pie, they should.
No, I was done talking about the Super League, but you brought this up, by the way. but this is something that I wanted to bring up and I didn't have in the notes, so that's why I'm kind of jumping on it. But anyway, those are the two things there. But like I said, I wouldn't throw the conversation. I think it's still a worthy, good one to have. I just wish I would have handled it a little bit differently, just for clarity's sake. And I wish I would have used a better example for the pie. But anyway, Team Draft Super League is hard. I'm glad we won.
I wouldn't get used to it.
We'll see. We're just trying to climb out of the basement here, okay?
Climb out of the basement? You guys are on the board.
I know. Now
you're in the winner's bracket.
But I'm saying when we come in, we're the underdogs. We really are. I mean, it's hard for.
It's actually kind of.
By the way, we have a special guest.
Yeah, that's it.
This chair I'm sitting.
Look, this is going to be a pretty relaxed variety show.
Yeah, I mean, you're laying on the bed. I've got cherry chair here jumping into the show.
Being in the underdog is kind of a powerful position. It's kind of like cutting someone in pack 2. Like it is not the most advantageous position, but you get to leverage it.
Oh, sure.
Because look, when you play against Finkel's team, everyone expects you to lose, right? They're favorites.
Yep. Less
of favorites than people think, by the way. I
agree.
Me and Ben were talking about before going in. We're like, I bet people think that you're like 4-1 underdogs when it's like 55-45 or something. It's really not by much.
Yeah, it's 60-40, 55-45.
But
I agree.
You get the benefit of if you lose, no one like, they don't give you crap for it because they're like, well, you're underdogs, whatever. Yeah. But if you win, it's like, yeah.
Yeah, so, we're the big heroes. I know.
So that's what's kind of brutal for my team is we never get that benefit.
Yeah, whatever. You guys are the best team, right?
I mean, you said that, but I would also say that.
I do say that.
Because I think we are.
I do think you are. Okay, let's get into our last main topic. Unless you come up with something else interesting that I need to address on the fly. Let's talk about the set review for Amonkhet.
Yeah, I want to get some goals out before we get into this because we're gonna do a little wandering. This feels like the kind of show where
dude, it's midnight. We're in Omaha.
It's actually literally like 12:40 or whatever.
Yeah, you got off the airplane half an hour ago or whatever.
After streaming 40 minutes before that.
We're loose.
We want to talk about not necessarily every card we underrated or overrated, but we're going to bring up some specific examples that stand out. More like what groups of cards we did, kind of the format structure. We've got a debate ahead of us. I know that from talking pre-show.
Oh, yeah. You had to shut me down just so we could save it for the show because I started to go off.
Yeah, and we want to talk about just like format structure, kind of like where we are, because I feel like these last couple formats have been somewhat confusing as to where they ended up. And
yes, these have been some of the most controversial, difficult formats we've ever had.
And I think that's less true of this one than it was of the last one.
I disagree. Let's just start disagreeing right now.
I guess the fact that you disagree kind of shows that. So let's.
Yeah.
All right. Let's start with our assumptions going into the set review and what led us to, I think, misevaluate some of the cards. Though I don't want to offer excuses because that doesn't matter. I think that we are generally pretty good at identifying the known unknowns. The unknown unknowns are a lot harder. The known unknowns, and what I mean by that actually isn't just politician doublespeak. It's when we know that we don't know how accurately we're reading our card.
I think that we really try to convey that in the set review.
Like we want to say something definitive in the sense that we want to give you something you can actually use going into the first week or whatever. But when we look at a card like, I don't know, I'm blanking on an exact example, but when we look at a card and we're like, we don't know, Drake Haven or something like that.
Sure.
You're like,
even, Unwavering Initiate or whatever. I mean, there's all these X factors with all these cards.
When we know that we don't know exactly how the card fits, we're going to say something like, it's really going to depend on the format. And that's not a cop out because we don't do that with cards like, Electrify or Magma Spray when we're like, even though Magma Spray, I think, ended up being underrated initially. That card is the best common by miles. Mm. But when we look at those cards, we don't have to hedge. We can just say, like, this card is good or whatever. But when you look at a card that's a little bit more contextual, it is worth noting that. So, I think going into the format, we had a couple things leading us astray in the sense that cycling and embalm are both mechanics that lend themselves to grindier, longer games. And
same thing with Aftermath.
In Aftermath 2, that made it look like the format was going to be a little bit slower and perhaps more synergy driven.
Man, I would say a lot. Like in my mind coming in,
okay, or even a lot.
Like I was looking forward to this like super long grindy value
and
format.
That is very far off from where the format landed. So that was one thing. So that led us to some, I think, systemic misevaluations.
Definitely.
And another thing that goes into it is exert is not a mechanic that intrinsically needs to be aggressive or controlling or whatever. Like it lends itself a little more to aggression because it literally has the word attack on it. But you can think of a ton of exert triggers that aren't +2/+2 or flying or, things like that. Exert triggers like draw a card, which on Watchful Naga. If there was more cards in that vein, exert would be a different animal. Turns out exert cards are just super aggressive across the board.
All the common and uncommon ones outside of Naga are just like this card becomes much better.
Plus summon menace and stuff like that. And it's harder for us to take a holistic view of those cards. And maybe that's something we could do, but one of the reasons I have led away from that is if we want to get a set review where we review every card out by like early in the week on that, we're not going to make groupings of cards and then study each of those cards.
No, and also I think that part of the charm and the fun for us of the set reviews is that we're also discovering these things along with you, right? Like, I wouldn't want to sit down with somebody from R&D who developed the set and go, do you just want me to tell you all the things about it? No, I want to learn these things, and that's part of what we do with that.
Yeah, well, also the person from R&D wouldn't know. But I mean, look at these words, Marvel.
You just can't help yourself.
Yeah, I'm actually joking.
Throwing daggers at fellow game designers here.
I actually am a huge fan of Magic game design. But I also am a huge fan of daggers.
This is coming from the guy who, if he screws up a card, they go, "Hey, Dev, can you just switch the little button on that?" And it's look, we fixed it.
There's an advantage to working in the digital medium.
There is.
Look. I can tell you this much: if you could change Aetherworks Marvel to costing 5 and requiring 8 energy, it would have been done.
Absolutely.
But I do think that this limited format has overall,
it's way faster, right? Let's just get that on the table. It's way faster.
And funnily enough, looping back to our first initial impressions of it, I actually have been enjoying this format more than I thought I would.
I still draft it.
Yeah, which is funny. I'm still excited to draft Amonkhet.
Yeah.
So it actually is,
yeah, you're right.
I think, a good set.
I think it is too. I've been enjoying it.
It's different than what I expected, but in a good way.
It's definitely not on my all-timers or anything like that.
No, but I think this is, I'm enjoying it more than Aether Revolt, for example.
I am too, but not more than Kaladesh. Like I like that
which
better.
Is kind of hard to point to exactly why. But
yeah.
So the biggest difference is this format is much faster and blocking is much worse. So when we look at cards that we're blocking your giant spiders or your dune beetles or ancient crabs,
or heck, even your embalm creatures,
or even your embalm creatures,
which I thought were going to be great blockers.
Yeah, we thought embalm creatures were going to step on aggro a little bit.
Yes.
Turns out they don't, because the aggro cards are just 2 mana 3/3s or 2 mana 3/3 flyers or 3 mana 5/4s. So
right, and it is interesting because I think that when you look at embalm versus aggro, that really does sum up what we thought versus what happened, because it's the opposite.
Right.
I thought a bunch of embalm creatures would be so good against these aggressive decks that they would just suffocate them with card advantage. And you'd just be like, once they felt like they finally cleared away your board, you just start embalming things. And you've got more cards in your hand, and you would just, attrition them out. And the things that Exert did was make blocking bad in general. So even if you have expendable blockers like embalm creatures, they just often didn't get to. And if you did get to do that, embalm's slow. It is slow.
They are costed, I think, with that in mind. Like they are very appropriate. Like, it feels like exert cards are a little pushed and embalm cards are a little
nerfed.
Yeah, like
I agree. It's your whole turn.
It's like the exert cards are overclocked by 0.5 and the embalm cards are slowed down by 0.5.
I agree. I think that's a really good way to put it, and that's how it feels when you play. When you bring back an Unwavering Initiate, a common embalm creature that's well statted, it's your whole entire turn. When you, exert a Gustwalker, a common well statted exert creature, happens to be one of the better ones, it's free.
Even like
There's
a
no
Nephcrop
downside.
Entangler,
Yeah, even an Entangler, which is like a more medium level one. It's the same thing. It just says, I get to attack, and you do not get a profitable block for the turns when I decide to exert. You just don't. Most of them give some type of evasion of some sort or bonus for being an attacker. And then, God forbid, you put a combat trick, into that mix as well, right? Like the one turn when you're like, exert my Embertorn Minotaur, and they're like, okay, I've got these two things, I'll double block and just take one for the team, and then you're just like brute strength. It's like game's over,
So where did that lead us? Let's take a look at some of the cards that we specifically underrated. I think one of the biggest ones was Trial of Solidarity.
Definitely.
We were like, oh, this card.
We thought it was build around.
Yeah, it turns out this card is just like a bomb. It's like one of the better cards you could open.
It's a very good card. Yeah. The fact that you can recycle it is insane. I mean, if you've ever had somebody cast it twice on you, it's absurd. And you don't. I think the thing is, you didn't need to go as wide as I envisioned you needing to go.
Yeah, just the creatures hit so well. Also, the fact that it gives vigilance is a nice combo with Exert.
It's just
matters more than
really powerful combo with Exert.
And I think making a difference too is that Red Cartouche and White Cartouche both ended up being better than we thought too, which is also good with Trial. And I think both those cards deserve to be on the list too of like cards we underrated. And you're going to see a consistent theme here. We're not going to go over every card like this, but the really aggressive 1-mana cards, I think, tended to just be better than they normally are.
They are.
And that's something that's not true in most formats.
Yeah, which goes, by the way, from unplayable to playable. I mean, like, they're normally just not even on the map.
Another one I want to mention is Horned Khopesh. I do think that...
you can't...
What? Yep. This card was underrated. I do believe that.
I agree. I had it as basically unplayable.
Right, we thought it was unplayable. Yeah. It's not unplayable.
No.
It's not a card I'm going to third pick and be happy about.
Very good, yeah.
It's an eighth pick or a ninth pick.
You can play it.
But it is playable, and that is a key difference. And again, we've talked about this. People tend to overcorrect. They think like, oh, this card wasn't playable, but now it's great. It's like, no, it went from unplayable to playable. But Horned Khopesh, Cartouche of Zeal, Bloodlust Inciter, these are all cards that are playable and fit and have a place in aggro decks, and the format's fast enough that especially the red decks are most likely going to be aggro. I think that if you're a base red deck and you have a Bloodlust Inciter, you are like 2/3 to have that in your deck.
I'd say a little less. Like, my thoughts on this are, I think that the community has overcorrected.
Yes.
Like, I think that people just look at Bloodlust Inciter and just say, that card's good or that card's playable, and they just put it in all their red decks. And I don't think that that's correct. I think that there's certain decks that want that card and that it performs quite well in. Like, the Super Low to the Ground once it went all the 1-drops and all the stuff, I think it's pretty good in that deck. And I think it's pretty good in red-green. I've had some success playing it in red-green, where if you do have it on turn 1, it feels like it's overperforming by a lot. But man, it's weird how readily people are able to, or willing to just be like, it's good. And just put that stamp on it. And they just put it in all these decks. And I'm like, you're playing Hyena packs and like, you don't have that many Exert creatures. Like, you should not just be throwing that card willy-nilly in your deck. It still has a ceiling that you need to be able to get to make that card playable. And even then, you have to accept the risk that you're playing. It's still a conditional card.
You're going to draw it on turn 5.
And you're going to hate your life. And it's very bad in that scenario.
But if you equip a Horned Khopesh to it, then all of a sudden it becomes a real
Your life is great.
So, we did, I think, categorically underrate these cards.
I think so too.
And I still stand by that if I see Bloodlust Inciter in a random set or Horned Khopesh in a random set, I'm going to start by saying this card is unplayable. Because I think if you took that and put it in the last 10 Magic sets, how often would this card be a playable card?
1 or 2 times probably.
Yeah, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 3 out of 10.
Yeah.
Right? And that's enough for me to say, in general, the heuristics I've developed, go back and listen to the episode on heuristics, by the way. I think that was one of the episodes I liked the most.
That was a very good one, yeah.
Tell me that 1-mana, 1/1 that gives haste, or cards like this, are not worth it. In fact, speaking of old episodes, the 10 biggest traps in limited, 1-mana, 1/1s, people love them. They love them so much that when they're finally playable, like now, people like go nuts.
I think they go a little overboard with it.
One thing that I thought was funny is I think we overrated Sacred Cat. I know I certainly did in the written review.
We did here for sure.
But then I think we underrated it. And afterwards, we're like, actually, no, this card sucks.
Yes.
The reality is, it's playable.
It's the same thing. You can put it in your deck, and it has a place in the format.
So there's a weird effect going on here, which is, I think intrinsically these cards are all playable in this format. right? Like, I think you can build decks with these cards, and
Yes.
it's correct.
Yes.
That makes other cards like this better than they would be. Festering Mummy, for example, is a card I always main deck now.
Yeah.
It didn't look very good.
No.
But it turns out when everyone is playing low to the ground aggro decks,
Defensive
it's good.
speed, man.
Sacred Cat is the same.
Yeah.
Sacred Cat is partially good because everyone else is playing all these crappy 2-mana 2/1s and 1-mana 1/1s.
And you need to be on the board.
And here's one of the things that I find, not always the best, is that if you don't have a 1 or a 2 drop, it feels like you're losing. Sometimes you're on the play and your first play is on turn 3, and that's fine. But often, if you don't have a play on turn 2,
God,
like
they go Fan Bearer, and you're like, oh no, because that's a good card,
right?
Like,
Fan Bearer is great.
Yeah.
So one of the lessons I think that's worth learning about all this is, first of all, I think this isn't like a leak I'm trying to fix.
That's what I was going to say too. Like, I don't think we need to go back and restructure things around.
When we look at the set review, I think we're going to take a look and just use what our, again, heuristics are for what cards do. And overall, cards like this tend not to be good. Maybe there's a critical mass here. Maybe there's enough, exert and format defining things that make it so blocking's bad and aggro's good, that these cards are good. That doesn't mean that it's fundamentally flawed to review cards like that. I mean, it just means that we're going to shoot low on some of these things. And part of it is we look for handholds in the set mechanics, which, as we mentioned before, led us astray a little bit. Just because it's not right or wrong that the format's fast and these set mechanics exist, but these mechanics lend themselves to slower formats in general. They just didn't this time.
And I think it was a check and balance thing because of Exert, by the way. I think these mechanics would totally lend themselves to a slower format if they didn't have a whole bunch of common creatures that were like unblockable whenever you wanted them to be.
And then the other thing is the gold cards. We look at those, and some of the gold cards here like made it look like synergy was a little more of a thing than it was. And that was something I wanted to move into on the overrated camp, which is synergy in general, like the cycling deck, the -1/-1 counter deck, the embalm deck. These are just not actual decks. Like, you can draft these decks. Sometimes they'll come together. In general, though, you're not drafting a highly synergistic linear deck. The one example I think is Zombies. Zombies is a real deck, and Zombies is really good.
And not coincidentally, it's an aggressive attacking
it's got
deck.
Binding Mummies and Wayward Servants, and is just trying to nug its opponent's life to Catcher's Name and stuff like that.
So like again, aggression wins the day here, and you see this, by the way, when people say a format is aggressive, it just means that the lowest common denominator, the fastest possible deck, is viable and possible. And that's what we have here. There are slower decks. It's just that if you run into the buzzsaw that is a good fast deck, you're not going to win. Yeah,
and that is something that you can't tell from the first look at the format, even though sometimes these decks end up being good. In this case, they did not in particular. And as such, I think, overrated some of the cards with Embalm. We overrated some of the defensive blocking cards.
I mean, effectively all the commons or whatever.
Yeah. And we also overrated some of the synergy cards because we're like, hey, look, even Wind Guide or Decimator Beetle point to these like powerful decks. And so therefore we think that these -1/-1 counter synergy cards are good, and it ended up not being the case.
I think if you want to put an umbrella over this whole thing, right? The reason why we thought these things is because there was Embalm, there was Cycling, and there was Aftermath. So those were the things that lended the format to a more slower, grindy, attrition-based format. Then you had Exert, that was kind of I'm going to be the aggro mechanic for the set. The thing to learn from this, from a big picture perspective, is that if the aggro mechanic is good or pushed or a little busted or whatever, the other stuff doesn't matter.
It doesn't give you time to do that.
Right. Like, I don't care about any of the other stuff. If you go back to any of the truly aggressive formats, remember Gatecrash with its red-white deck? There were 7-drops in that set that were amazing, that were like auto 2-for-1s and 5/5 with flying, and they left this huge... Didn't matter.
Yeah.
It did not matter. None of the other stuff matters. The thing that trumps all of it is if there is a highly aggressive mechanic or deck or color pair or whatever that you can consistently get. And you can here. And that says, I don't care about... I think the most interesting one, because we talked about it with regards to Embalm, is Cycling. Because it punishes the living hell out of cycling. You don't get to just... You cycle twice in a game against that.
I wanted to get to that. So this is perfect because one of the early criticisms I had, which I actually want to walk back, is that cycling reduces variance to too high of a degree, and it leads to a lot of similar feeling games. That hasn't been the case because cycling's too slow.
Yeah.
You don't get to cycle that much. And I have enjoyed what cycling has added to the format without feeling like it was too much. I think it was very much in a good spot. So I actually think that particular part of how cycling, like, I think that design of the set actually worked out really well.
The balance between the two?
I think cycling can go wrong very easily, and it did not here.
It definitely did. I still have that nitpick about the conditional cards. I really wish that they would back off on that a little bit, but in play, it doesn't feel like it like ruined the format or anything. It's just, I think, a fundamentally bad decision.
Yeah, you're going to be yelling at that cloud for a while, though, I think.
No, I mean, the one that really bothers me is the Forsake the Worldly.
Yeah.
Like, I just think that they shouldn't have. I think that that's a bad card to print. It just disincentivizes you from wanting to make play cool build around stuff. When you're already not incentivized to do so, it's just like the nail in the coffin that they can just main deck kill it on top of all the other reasons not to do it.
So I do think that the one mana cyclers played out really well. In general, I think cycling was just a nice touch. Horror of the Broken Lands has a little synergy with Wander and Death, and that is nice. And Heckma Sentinels is a kind of cool card. And I think overall it worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
I think that the cycling deck or spending too much time cycling did not, and we haven't seen that be successful.
No.
But I think that in general, cycling ended up smoothing things out in a good way. And I do like that. I like that Compelling Argument's a very playable card. I really like that Red-Blue Spells ended up being a great deck.
I do too. I really like that. And it's because of those, we talked about it, but those uncommon payoffs.
Yeah.
Put so much, like, it reminds me that those type of cards are super important. You know, the Javelineer and the Drake, like, that, getting those right makes that deck.
Yeah, and it does, and that deck is there, and I think it's fun to play.
But, like, if either of those cards were worse or didn't exist.
Also, how good your Red Blue Spells deck is very contingent on how many Magma Sprays you have.
Yeah.
If you had 2 Magma Sprays, your deck's probably great.
Yeah.
But overall, I would say that where we did well was the cards. I think we did a good job evaluating the cards that didn't care as much whether they were in aggro or control or whatever, like the cards we're just evaluating on power level. Mm-hmm. The cards that hinge too far in either the aggro or control direction, I think we ended up being more off on.
Yeah.
And
like Greater Sandworm comes to mind too.
Yeah, that card I think is just not good.
It's just like medium. I still play it sometimes.
Yeah,
but,
it's playable, but
like I thought this is perfect. Yeah. It's the best of both worlds.
This looks like, Desert Ceradon look like the kind of card you want. I don't think it really is.
And they just don't, because again, cycling's too slow. I really do think that comes down to that.
So it has been an interesting journey going through this set. And like I said, I'm not done with this set. I actually have enjoyed drafting it a lot more than I thought I would after the first week or so. And there's a lot of pressure to get on the board very quickly. That is true.
Yeah.
And you should take cards that let you do that. But the gameplay has been pretty good, I think, outside of that. I wish blocking
hard.
I wish blocking was better. That I think is like the main thing. But I love blocking.
I just feel like this set is dominated by Exert.
It is.
I just feel like they should have notched it down a little bit. Like, I don't mind having an aggressive deck be good, but I feel like it just cripples a lot of really, like, you could tell they were going for some cool stuff.
Yeah. It's weird. I can't really explain it because I like blocking and I like synergy decks, but I have been enjoying playing the set a lot. So
yeah, I'm kind of medium on it. Like, again, I think my thinking is that, like, I don't really care about my own personal preferences as far as this goes. Like, whatever, I like what I like. That isn't, I'm just talking about from a big picture perspective. You should, I think, have slower and or more synergy based decks appear a bit more often than they do here. And as a drafter, I shouldn't feel stupid for doing it.
Yes, I think that is a trap. That's one of the
I'm just like
the things I like least
I want
about
to explore.
Sets is when you give me a handhold and I feel and I'm dumb for taking it. That makes me that makes me feel punished.
That's the thing I don't like.
I would like to see the pendulum swing a little over the next couple sets. It feels like the last couple sets have ended up being very aggressive,
tempo-y, aggro-y.
Yeah, between Ether Revolt, Kaladesh, and this. That I think that it would be nice to have a set where it's like we don't want to get to Modern Masters level of slowness.
No.
That was a bit much.
No, I like balance though.
Yeah.
That's the thing I miss. Like, one of the things we talk about when we talk about like our favorite draft sets of all time, a lot of people say Innistrad. It's my favorite. And when you draft triple Innistrad, you did have a balance there where you could draft a deck around, there's a card called Travel Preparations. That was
the white-green beatdown deck was, I think, overall the best deck.
It was consistent. It was good.
But it was by no means the only deck.
Yeah. And then you could do these self-mill strategies, these flashback strategies. But when you did those,
Black humans.
Yeah. You were taking on some risk by taking these cards that had payoffs, but you didn't feel dumb.
No, the payoffs were actually there.
They were actually there, and you had to draft well and you had to get a little lucky. But, they were there. And in this format, I feel like if I take any of these, or God forbid I explore like one of the more crappy, like
Faith of the Devoted.
Faith of the Devoted. That's what I was going to say. That looks like a card that I'd like to say, what can I do with this? What if I just take all the 1-drop cyclers? What happens? I want to try that, but I just know what's going to happen. I'm going to get smashed by some commons, just some exert commons or whatever that are just going to punch my face in it. And I don't, I'm willing to dip down pretty low to experiment late. I have already drafted this format so much that I'm at that point where I'd love to branch out, but
you're in the danger zone of spewing a lot of tickets.
Yeah, and I'm not. I just end up staying in the middle. Know, I've just been drafting black green a ton. I'm just like black cartouching everything.
Oh, that's an underrated card, by the way. Black cartouche.
Way underrated.
Yeah, best black common.
I've been taking it over every other black common.
Well,
I think
that would be yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so I think that
I've just been taking it over everything. But
that is just a card that when you're beating down and they play that, it's like, oh, I'm dead.
Right. It negates 3 1-drops.
Yeah.
It's just like, it literally kills one of them and then it smashes them for enough, on almost any, respectable creature. Anyway, I don't want to get off track, but that, I've enjoyed that part of it, of the format, of adjusting to this hyper aggro stuff. But when it comes to, again, my main point here was to look at it from a big picture. This is an exert world in my mind. Yep. And exert has really kind of...
It's Slitherblade's world we're just living in.
No. Do you want to talk about... I don't want to... We could do that.
I actually feel like we did touch on Slitherblade earlier without mentioning the actual card, which is...
Well, I think it's different, though, because I think it's bad.
I don't think it's bad.
I do. I just think Sliverblade is straight up bad. I think that, yes, I can see decks for Bloodlust Insider. I can see decks for the cheap cartouches. Those things make sense in the right context. But I still see 13th pick Slitherblade.
Yeah, that doesn't mean it's unplayable.
That wasn't my whole argument. I do think it's a strong point that it's unplayable, that when you see that type of thing going around that late, I see it often. I'm not talking about I saw S13. I'm just saying it's often... People are like, full art basic land. Yeah, I'd rather have that than the Slitherblade in the pack, right? This is not an archetype that people routinely draft.
No, I don't think it should be. I think that people, again, overvalue the, let's take 6 Slitherblades or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think in an aggressive blue deck, especially if you have Horn Khopesh or other ways to pump it, it is playable. It's not
okay.
It's not great, but it's playable.
I'm not going to, try to shoot that down. But
right.
I'm just saying, look, I'm looking at what I'm seeing, okay? The good the good archetypes are the archetypes that people draft and then kill you, right? They use these, if somebody shows up and how many times have I played against red-blue spells? Well, not a ton. It's not the archetype that pops up all the time, but it's
definitely
probably double digits, right? And when I see that deck, I'm like, that's a deck. Yeah. If you get the right pieces for that deck is great, really good, right? I think that people think that A Slitherblade is good and it goes in a deck, even though they never draft it and nobody ever plays it against them. They just saw it on the PT or something. Or that there is this mythical sliver of decks where that card is good. And I just don't see either in my reality. And I draft a crap ton and I watch a lot of people draft. And I just don't see that.
I think it's a niche playable in aggressive blue decks, blue-white or
that is such a narrow, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I just feel like people don't think that. I think they think it's good.
People want to live in a binary world. They want to live in a world where cards are awful or great.
Right.
They don't want to live in a world where cards are situationally good.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to get at here is
and
let's
people
look
get
at the
very
reality.
excited when they found out a card that was unplayable was not.
Yes.
Which
is exciting.
So they notch it all the way up to great.
Yeah.
And that's just not where it is.
Okay.
But I think at the end of the day, this format's really aggressive. I think we've definitely conceded that, and and adjusted our expectations for which cheap cards are good.
I've certainly adjusted my draft picks and ideas.
And I'm playing I had a draft today. I played Bloodlust Insider. I didn't feel bad about it.
Yeah, I did a sealed.
I played Horned Khopesh, and it was good. Festering Mummy. These are all cards.
Totally.
But on the other hand, I think that people tend to overcorrect a little. But in general, I think that this format's really aggressive, and 1 and 2 drops are good is just real.
Yeah, so. I think so too. And that is, I think, the biggest takeaway.
Yeah.
From the set review, from a big picture perspective, I think our individual card evaluations, if you adjust them accordingly from that, probably stack up just fine.
Yeah.
But this format has been, I think, you said you don't feel like quite as strongly, but I think it's very divisive. Like when I talk to pros and stuff, I mean, Jesus, every single time on the Team Draft Super League stuff, it's just people, and I'm not talking about making arguments about what you should take, but just like Ben to Cruel Reality.
Right.
And he says, I think that card's great. And they're but they don't think it is. And that's the arguments that I'm seeing still.
I mean, you can set aside Cruel Reality. It's a one random mythic.
But I can bring this is just the most visible option.
But there were other arguments
tons of them.
So yeah, I guess Binding Mummy versus, Temet or whatever, Vizier of Noctimoon.
Yeah,
stuff.
I mean, this is another Ben one, but...
Mostly people want to know how Ben ended up Obzon with 2 Cradle Cursed in his deck.
Yeah. But I mean, look, I saw Ben and Martin Juza have an argument on Twitter, and Ben just straight up said, you and I just view this format way different.
Yeah, it was the pack with Bone Picker in it.
Yes. Yeah, here's another example. Every time these conversations come up, it's people disagreeing with each other, hard, not subtle.
But I think you can take away some of the individual card evaluations because that doesn't matter. I think.
Whoa, that doesn't matter? What do you mean?
In terms of what the format looks like overall.
Yeah.
People are. I think
my point was just that people don't agree.
Yes, but I think people do agree that this format's very fast, and that the and that the low drops tend to be good. That's what I mean. Whereas I've had other formats where the format is more in disagreement. I agree there's more.
I mean, I think that each of these card evaluation things shows what the people really think.
It does.
But Ben thinks Cruel Reality is a really good card.
Yeah, but he doesn't disagree that the format's fast.
I know. So I'm not putting words in his mouth. I'm just saying you can't have both.
No, but I think you can agree on the format and disagree on a particular card.
Yes, but my point is that we're seeing that happen multiple times.
Yes, maybe that happens a little more than average.
8s?
But that has more to do with just confusing cards than it does with a format.
Sure. Look, I'm not trying to
Cruel Reality
pin
are both weird cards.
Yeah, I'm not trying to pin necessarily why. I'm just saying I'm seeing these arguments a lot.
Yeah, and I think it's. I will say these arguments are really high value.
I think they're great.
And this is why Twitter's great, by the way.
Yeah.
You get to see Ben and Martin argue about the merits of a card.
2 excellent limited players.
And that's a good thing to have access to. That awesome. Should help your understanding. Especially since, trust me, Ben will talk your ear off. If you want to tweet Ben questions about limited, he'll answer them.
I know he will.
This isn't a joke. If you tweet him questions about flavor, he'll ignore you.
Yes.
But if you ask him real limited questions, he loves to answer them.
He does.
And that's a resource.
I've seen him do it at GPs where random people will come up and ask him and he's just in full Ben Stark mode.
So take advantage of that. We always say oh, it's lucky that, you, Marshall, you get to go over your draft with Ben and that's a great resource. Obviously, if people go too nuts, then he's going to stop. Yeah. He's not going to answer everything. But
if you have an interesting
in general, Ben, if you ask Ben an interesting question, he will answer it. Yeah. And I've seen him do this many times.
Me too. And, I think the advice, by the way, just as when you're going to ask people, us too, on Twitter, if you can keep the question into a tightly grouped question.
Yes.
This is my sealed pool, or do you like my deck, or what would you cut, is such a time sink, when you get 10 of those a day or whatever.
Yes,
it's much better if you're concise.
If someone asks, "This is my sealed pool, how you build it?" I just want to answer them.
Yeah, I don't either. It's it's too much time.
But if he was "Hey, what's the pick out of this pack?" or "Hey, do you think Cruel Reality is better than Magma Spray or whatever?" Those are anything that. This is why Twitter works, by the way. Anything that fits in 140 characters and you can be responded to in 140 characters, you're probably in a good sign. If you have to multi-tweet a question, it's probably not a good question.
Yeah, so, I agree.
But I think if you phrase your questions well, then you would generally get answers, and that's true of not just Ben or me or you. It's true of a lot of the people you could ask.
It's just being respectful of the other person's time, because I love engaging with, our listeners and stuff, but we do get a lot of overhead from that. And so it's great if I can be like I love it when people tell me, I 3-0'd this draft, check it out. Yeah. Thanks guys, or whatever. I always look at the thing and I'll often respond or favorite it or whatever, or the tweet, just to show that's awesome. That's a great thing. It is the bigger, deeper questions that you can't really type out,
I would prefer that you tweet pictures of food at me, but yeah, I guess draft decks also work.
I don't want that because then I just get hungry.
Yeah, but I'm always hungry, so I might as well have
I'm hungry now.
Yeah, I am too.
We don't have to be there for a while. I'm getting ideas. Did we have anything else we want to do before we put a little bow on this bad boy?
No, I think not. I mean, this felt...
What an interesting set, man.
Yeah.
So different than I thought it was going to be. I think this is the set that has the biggest delta between what I thought it was going to be going in and what it ended up.
And that's, I think, part of why I'm enjoying it. I had expectations.
It makes it more interesting, yeah.
It challenged my expectations. It's different than it was, and I have been liking drafting it.
Yeah. I've been drafting it too. I haven't really checked with myself on if
that doesn't mean I can't give some good R&D beats, but I actually really do like this set.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I'm curious. We'll have to wait until we get our final gavel down on the Sunset Show for Amonkhet. But this has definitely been a conversation starting machine, this set. And also the Team Draft Super League has really sparked that too. But anyway, I have one more question before we go.
Yeah.
It's very short. This is like a Twitter question. This is a good example, okay? Except for that I'm going to make you talk about it more because I got you sitting in front of me and you can't ignore it. You're playing against John Finkel, the GOAT. You have his deck list. He has the card Gale Strike in his deck. On your third turn, your third turn, you play Trial of Strength. You make a 4/2 beast token. You pass the turn. John plays his third land. He has red, blue, blue. And he says, go. Do you attack?
Nope.
Okay. I didn't either. If you want to find us on social media, I am Marshall_LR. Available for food pictures, questions, whatever you need. He's LSV on everything. You can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com. If you want to catch up with our stream, you streamed tonight. You did some drafts. All of that kind of stuff is available right on the front page of lrcast.com. I want to remind you about our sponsor, channelfireball.com. Fantastic customer service, quick shipping. They even buy cards back from you. You can get a 30% bonus if you're trading them in. They have a full selection of singles, sealed product, all that kind of stuff at channelfireball.com. And make sure you check out the Grand Prix Vegas page that I'm going to put in the show notes if you're planning on attending. There's a lot going on there. Luis and I are going to be there. Everybody's going to be there in Magic. I highly recommend making the trip if you are able to swing it, just because it does kind of have this different feel from a normal GP. It almost feels like a convention. It's going to be really fun, and we certainly hope to see you there. That's going to do it for this limited resources from Omaha. Chair, say goodbye. We'll see you guys next time.
So we had something come up on a recent show, which had a couple people ask about, which I thought was interesting. Which TV shows would you rather watch than do a draft?
This is a great question. This is my bar, by the way. I don't watch TV anymore. I haven't for years.
Neither do I. And
it's drafting.
Yeah, and I think that the reason is, especially with draft leagues have really exacerbated this.
Oh, God, yeah.
Because
TV doesn't stand a chance.
Right. Before draft leagues, if it was like, I want to go to bed in about an hour, I can't join a draft. Okay, I'll watch an episode of something.
Yeah.
Now it's like, I could just start a draft or finish the draft I was doing earlier or whatever. There are some TV shows I have watched the whole show of.
Yeah. Are you going to limit this to TV shows or are sporting events on here too?
Just TV shows.
Okay, cool. Something that somebody could go find on whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched any basketball this year. I could watch the Warriors murder the Cavs, I guess, if I wanted to. But, I watch basketball, watch football like every now and then when the mood strikes me or when I'm...
But these are shows that people can go dig up.
But these are literally just television shows.
I can't wait.
We're not talking about movies.
I wonder how many of these we're going to share. I'm curious. Because I'm in the same boat. It takes the best.
I made a list of the best 5. I do have one honorable mention, though.
Okay.
Honorable mention, Heroes Season 1.
It was so good.
It's heartbreaking, right?
It makes me sad when you say it.
Yeah.
Save the cheerleader. It was so good.
Yeah, they got gutted by the writer's strike, I guess. But Heroes...
Did that happen during that time?
Yeah, that's what happened for their Season 2, I guess. Heroes Season 1 was just phenomenal. I loved it.
If you want the biggest drop-off in awesome...
Just watch Season 1 and then be done.
Yeah.
And I think you'll be good. But yes, that was amazing.
That was your honorable mention?
That was my honorable mention.
Okay.
Number 5, I have Veronica Mars.
Which, watch that.
If you haven't seen it, is highly underrated. It's the favorite TV show of our latest Pro Tour champion, Jerry Thompson. He's actually the one who got me into it. V Mars it's a little old now. So some of the references are dated, especially when it comes to technology. Because, I mean, it's not like insanely old, but it's like 10 years old or something. Okay. But it's insanely good. Like,
it's a really good show.
It actually is just a legit good show. Is it like a serious,
like, is it a kid show?
It sounds like a kid show, but it's not. It's actually serious.
It's a real show. Okay.
So, and Kristen Bell's very good at it. So, okay. I thought Veronica Mars was excellent. Number 4 is another heartbreaker. Firefly.
Firefly, yes. Very good show. I have watched that too.
And then you can watch Serenity if you want the movie, the follow-up.
Yeah.
Again, a heartbreaker. And I got so brutalized by this show because I remember finding season 1 that my brother had bought, and I watched it. I'm like, and I go up to him all excited. I'm like, when's season 2 coming out? And he's like,
oh no. He's like, sit down.
Take a seat. I've got bad news for you.
Yeah. It ended up getting canceled.
It got canceled after one season. There was like scheduling stuff and whatnot.
That's a good show.
But it was just a legit great show.
Yeah.
Just actually insanely good.
Yeah, that's what's his name?
Joss Whedon.
Josh Whedon. Just fantastic dialogue. Just a good show. Yeah.
All the characters were amazing.
God, I'm already rooting for number 1, by the way. I hope you don't let me down.
So number 3, Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones.
I've watched all of it.
Like, I read all the books multiple times, actually.
You have?
Yeah.
You recommend it?
The books are great.
Okay. Because you read a ton of books like that.
I do,
you know, that genre.
Yeah, sci-fi, fantasy. I love them. Game of Thrones is very good. It is pretty brutal. Like, you got to know that going in. And the TV show and the books have actually forked at this point, and throughout it started out much more faithful and got less faithful as the season went on, which I think is fine, by the way. I'm not one of the people who would be
You're not a purist?
No, who's like, oh, this is different from the books. I just enjoy them both. They're both great. And they both feel the same. Like, I've had this experience many times where, like, I'll read a book series and then they'll make, like, a TV show or a movie out of it. And I'm like, God, this is so different than what I thought this would be like. And maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but it's different. Game of Thrones feels like it's just ripped out of the pages. Like, the way the characters is just so good. It's like the people who made the show, and I know George R. Martin was a part of it, but they captured the spirit of the characters, the soul of the characters in a way that I think is very impressive. Like, I am, you know.
I mean, that show is awesome.
Yeah, the show's very good. It's very well done.
Again, if I've watched every episode of a show.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
These are shows that I would choose to watch over doing a draft, which is, again, an extremely high bar. And, to not go too deep into life advice here, you should have a high bar for how you spend your time. If you, at the end of doing something for 2 hours, can't really justify why you did it, you probably could have been doing something better.
And that's why draft has stuck with me, because I always feel engaged and my brain is working and I have stuff to talk about with my friends.
Magic makes you smarter.
Yeah.
So number 2, Breaking Bad. I think that makes the number 1 show not super hard to guess, but
I know what it is now, and I'm happy.
But Breaking Bad starts a little slow, but there's a reason it's one of the most heralded TV shows of all time.
That show is good.
It really is that good.
Captivating, awesome.
Yeah, just insane character development, I'm
not surprised we're on the same page with these.
Pizzas on roofs, everything that you could ask out of a show.
Number 1, The Wire.
You did it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sweet. I don't have access
when you
to
come
his
at the
list,
king,
by
you
the
best
way.
not miss.
Yeah.
Like,
that is just the best show ever made.
I've rewatched it.
I'm so close. I made a pact with myself that I would wait till I forgot enough, and it stuck with me for it's been years.
Yeah.
And I'm ready. I'm going to go back in. I'm going to hang out with McNulty. It's so
hard to describe exactly why the show's so good, because it
is hard, isn't it?
It's not that it has like an insane overarching plot in general.
It's not. It's like the opposite of Game of Thrones, and like it doesn't have these like huge moments.
It really doesn't.
It's like this kind of slow burn subtlety thing.
The reason I think it's so good is that the dialogue is out of this world.
Yes.
Every single character feels like a completely fully fleshed out human being. Which just shows
there's no bad guys and good guys.
There's really not.
No.
Unless you just think they're all bad guys, which also kind of works.
But that might speak to humanity anyway.
Yeah.
But
they're all gray guys, like, there's tons of character development. It feels like its own world, but like it feels like you're watching just a bunch of real people.
Yes.
But it's written in a way that's much snappier than real life. But it is just insanely good. I really do recommend it. Again, it just starts a little bit slow and it's a little weird because you're like, there's no like one big shiny thing that grabs your eye and you're like, this is what it's about. It's just not like that.
That's just not how they made that show.
But I think it's the best show of all time.
I do too.
And, since it's our podcast, it's an unimpeachable rating at this point.
Yeah, especially since we're in consensus on it.
I will say that if I didn't mention one of your favorite shows, it probably means the show's bad. So I do have to.
There was a couple of shows that I do.
This is not a comprehensive list.
But you hit on.
But I mean, it's not like this list is a bunch of shows you haven't heard of. Veronica Mars is probably the least known show on the list.
That's the one I haven't seen.
But there's a reason. Is like, I don't watch a lot of TV to try to find good shows. Mm-hmm. If enough people tell me about a show, people whose opinions I trust, then I'll watch the show. So,
have you watched The Sopranos?
No, I have not.
Okay, I think you should. It's on the level of these shows. It was really good.
I did watch Lost. Lost pissed me off too. So I'm
Lost is it's talk about writer's strike.
Yeah, but seriously, watch The Wire. If you get anything out of this, it is
watch The Wire.
Just watch the goddamn Wire.